So how are you doing, Adam? How was that interview for you?
Okay, there we go. It took a second to switch over. It was good. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah. Kind of sometimes it's kind of odd watching yourself be interviewed.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird.
So do you think our friend will join us?
Yeah, I'm sending invites now.
Okay, great. Well, welcome people, folks, as you're coming in. We're doing this post American Thought Leaders interview space with Adam Coleman. Adam wrote this amazing book called Black Victim to Black Victor, which is one of the things that we talk about in this interview. We're going to talk about that today.
And also, I want to mention Jaleesa. She is here joining us as a speaker. If you want to introduce yourself.
Keep saying, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, it just keeps saying connecting, and then it says my mic is off. I'm like,
No, we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what's going on. Hi, how are y'all doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, I just moved. Well, I'm still like in the process of moving, so I'm trying to like find some Wi-Fi. Haven't got anything connected. I'm just all over the place.
Hey, Jaleesa, how are you? It's great to meet you.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent. I don't know if I don't know if you happened to watch this thing with Adam.
To watch what?
Oh,
Oh goodness. Is this? Okay. I'm gonna move inside. It's too loud.
Yeah, Jaleesa, you can mute your mic.
So Adam, why don't we, I think we can just start chatting as kind of people come in here. I wanted to just kind of start with this idea. You've had this kind of transformation over the last few years and into being what I guess you describe yourself as a Black conservative. And so this is one of the things I don't know how many people here have, watched the interview previously. But what if you could kind of give us a sketch of how that actually happened, and where you came from?
Sure. I would say that, I was a moderate Democrat. I would call myself a liberal. I think a lot of it, well, there were certain things that happened. It was several red pills, so to speak, several moments that occurred that had me change my perspective a little bit, or see things in a bigger perspective and decide what makes sense for me. So I would say the biggest thing, though, was realizing that the sources of information that I was consuming wasn't 100% truthful, to say the least. It was heavily biased, and it had one particular agenda, and it wasn't to give me a real perspective. And so for myself, I'm hearing, what Republicans want to do from a left-leaning perspective rather than hearing it directly from the right, and understanding what they're trying to do. So it was just realizing the level of manipulation that was happening within the media, and the narratives that were given, and were they actually true? that's ultimately what kind of started my journey. And once I broke free of the mainstream media grasp, I wanted to listen to everything. So a lot of people don't know I listened to progressives for months. And then when I was done listening to progressives, I would listen to conservatives and some libertarians. And then I just kind of decided what I liked and what made sense to me. And certain things make sense for me. Certain things I still believe in. Freedom of speech, I think, is incredibly important. It was important to me before. I believe we all deserve the right to speak freely, no matter your political affiliation. And I believed that before. I still believe it today. So at this point, it just depends on what the issue is.
Was there something, do you remember a specific moment or like something where you thought, oh my goodness, my grasp of reality is shifting here. What am I seeing? What's going on? This kind of cognitive dissonance. Do you remember that when that happened?
There were several. I remember listening to a Peter Schiff podcast when he was on Joe Rogan, and after I was done listening to it, I was like, holy shit. I agree with everything this man just said. And I'm like, does that mean I'm conservative? Like I was utterly confused because everything he said makes sense, and I agreed with it. It was one of those moments where I was kind of messed up for like a day because of the information I received. The other thing was I had met a British conservative. I didn't know he was a conservative when I met him, but when I was traveling abroad in Madrid, I met a British conservative, and we connected on other things. We didn't even talk about politics initially, and then he brought up Brexit, and I asked him, "Why are you for Brexit?" Because he showed support. And mind you, the narrative that was told to me was that Brexit is solely about these racist English people who don't want foreigners in their country. And I asked him why he was for it, and he told me that the United States would never allow an outside governing body to tell it what to do. And it was one of those sentences that made so much sense. It was very clear. And it told me that there are multiple narratives to this one situation, this one advocacy from the English perspective. And from there, we became closer, and he would share with me, different authors and things of that nature. So he's actually the one who introduced Thomas Sowell to me. And yeah, I would say he was a major part in my political awakening, so to speak. I was just kind of opening my eyes slowly. So without him, I wouldn't be here.
And why do you mention Thomas Sowell?
I'm sorry, you broke up for a second.
So why do you mention Thomas Sowell at this point?
I think Thomas Sowell is a very logical person, and he's not hyperbolic. He's a very interesting guy, and he's kind of like someone that's similar to me. Like, he gets notoriety because of his work, but he doesn't really want all the shine. Like, he doesn't necessarily want to be on television. He doesn't want to be a pundit. He doesn't want to be in front of the cameras. He just wants to sit back and write his books and occasionally do an interview, which, as he's gotten older, has become rare and rare. And I like that about him. He gives off the persona that he's a very humble person and someone who just thinks for himself and does what makes sense. And even he had a political transformation after working for government, and seeing how much it doesn't work. So he's someone that I really respect. I actually have an image of him on my wall that an artist friend drew. So yeah, he's someone who's impactful from an intellectual standpoint. But going back to like writing books, I didn't want my book to be like Thomas Sowell's. I think he has his own style, his own approach. I wanted it to be my own. So, I hope when people read my book, they'll see that it is different. And it's the way I wanted to express myself.
Well, he's got a whole lot of books on a whole lot of different subjects. It's kind of quite remarkable. I think one of the things that I said in the interview also is that the thing that he taught me, which was absolutely profound, and I think this is in his original kind of textbook, economics. I think it's called Basic Economics or something like that. It's just that the moment that you start looking at the world in terms of incentive structures, as opposed to, people say, I'm doing this because I want to achieve this. This is my goal. But they often don't look at the realities around the incentive structures, around the solution they find to this specific thing. And basically what ends up happening is that it gets really, really messed up because they didn't have this basic conception of needing to consider the incentive structures that exist when trying put any solution to any issue. So anyway, and this is just one of like multiple profound ideas that Thomas Sowell has brought, at least to me and the world. Jaleesa, I wanted to you're up here. We've never met before. I wanted to say hello and kind of welcome you on stage.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, my signal is not good. But how are you? I'm good.
And so, why don't you tell us a little bit of your story? I know Adam mentioned that you were excited to join today, and I know you have an interesting story. Maybe you can tell us.
Yes, I'm actually a teacher. I've been in education for a little bit over 10 years now. And I just now started podcasting because, I just actually did a podcast with Adam, and we talked about this whole like victimhood thing. And because I see it all the time, especially with the demographic that I teach, this is something that I'm very passionate about.
I also invited Sphinx up here. Sphinx hosts a whole lot of spaces. We've been in some spaces together, and she always makes things more lively, more exciting. So welcome on stage here.
Thank you so much, Jan. I appreciate the invite. Appreciate the space and being here. I'm looking forward to hearing everybody. Thank you.
Adam, we were talking about your journey from victimhood to victorhood, as you describe it. I actually really love that construction. And you mentioned a few of these kind of moments that did you cover the gamut of the things that kind of changed your thinking, or there were a series of these progressions, and I think there's a couple of others that you could share at this point.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I didn't really talk too much about is like when you succeed at certain things, it kind of pulls you out of that as well. So it's very easy to feel like a victim when you're failing. It's a lot easier to come out of it when you start having things go your way. But I think it was basically just a shift in my thinking. There are multiple moments where I had to overcome my anxiety. That was something that was holding me back. Because when you have depression and anxiety, you're introspective, but you're negative, and all you see is negative, and all you do is worry. And and I needed to be clear-headed. So it's a longer story as far as overcoming my anxiety. I write about it on my Substack if people want to read about it. But once I was able to overcome that, my life started changing. And around that same time, I was kind of like discovering myself all over again, especially like after it was a bad breakup with an ex-girlfriend of mine, where I kind of felt like I didn't know who I was. Like, what do I even like to do? Because I did everything that she did. I hung out with her family, and then, all of that is gone one day. Excuse me. I'm like battling a cough here. But I think that after that, I started to go down a path of, discovery and accepting accountability. So with that failed relationship, I asked, what could I have done better? I just started looking at everything that was going wrong in my life. I just asked questions as far as how could I have done it differently? So I'm trying not to cough in your ear. How could I have done it differently? Where are my flaws? You know what? Hold on one second. I need to drink something. I'm sorry.
Jaleesa, Sphinx, I want to invite you to kind of jump in as well. So this is, I've really only held spaces where, there's a whole lot of people. There's someone organizing extensively behind the scenes. This is one where we're just kind of trying to be a lot more freeform, and so I want to allow for that. I don't want people to think that we can't do that here because I haven't done it that way in the past.
Well, this is actually my first time on a space, so I'm just learning it like you guys.
And Sphinx, I frankly, I really appreciate you being in here with us in a kind of small attempt at something new. So maybe you can, I don't know, are you familiar with Adam's work at all? And basically what we're looking at is there's kind of two things: people changing their way of thinking through kind of being shocked into it through what they see in the broader society, and maybe some kind of influential people who have changed their minds, and there's this other theme of basically victimhood narratives which dominate people's lives, and how to kind of overcome those and into a very, very different way of thinking. And of course, there's also another sort of element of race, which we discuss in the interview, and so we could talk about that as well. But these are kind of the overlying themes. And of course, in the title, there's this, the nuclear family is something that gives people a huge step up in terms of likelihood of success, and that sort of fits into the discussion as well.
So, unfortunately, I don't know of Adam's work specifically, but I truly look forward to learning about it. One thing I will say is I've spoken a great deal on the circuit about this topic. One thing I'll say briefly now is that when I speak about this, I really try to distinguish between victimhood and the fact that someone at some point may have been a victim. And to decide to not live in victimhood doesn't mean that one was never a victim, right? Because we have victims of sexual assault, we have all kinds of victims, but victimhood is present. Victimhood is a way of living today. So I acknowledge realities of facts that have taken place amongst, within a certain person's life, for instance. But then from there we go, okay, now what, right? Now what? Do we want to step up, go up the stairs, or do we want to take the elevator down? And that's sort of the way I approach this, as victimhood is a present way of being, thinking, feeling, existing. Doesn't mean when you go to this way, to be honest, I have not seen Victorhood before, but to kind of denounce that victimhood thing, I just want to be clear. It doesn't mean you are denying, right? Like a child that was abused at one point. I have a lot of compassion for instance, kids that were abused and whatnot. Doesn't mean that you own your reality, but you got to own it. To have ownership means you don't live in victimhood, right? You're not sort of possessed by this sense of victimhood. You've got to take ownership now. That means now what? So I just wanted to say that, and I look forward to the space. Thank you.
Thank you, Sphinx.
If I could interject, yeah, I wanted to kind of piggyback off that because, yes, when I talk about this whole victimhood thing, it's not of people who have actually, dealt with something or went through something. It's people who are using whatever they can to make people feel sorry for them. And we've seen like people just kind of abuse this whole thing. And with, I am someone who's in education. I've been in education for a very long time. They use this whole when we're talking about race, black and brown, to make the kids feel like they're already like at the bottom. And that's what frustrates me the most, because they're already going into this world thinking they're either less than or someone's after them, or they're going to have to blame, something that goes on in their life on someone else. And I'm just, it's becoming like I don't want to say like a disease, but you see a lot of people just kind of using whatever they can to make someone feel bad for them.
Adam, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, like you said, Jaleesa was saying, to make other people feel bad for them. And so that's the other side to it. It's the people who have a savior complex as well. I think it's a relationship between the two. And it's hard to remain a victim with someone. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It's hard to remain someone with a victim mentality, especially an unjustified victim mentality, if there isn't someone who is, propped up as your savior. So in terms of race, I think often, me being Black, I'm supposed to look for a governmental savior, look for a white savior, look for an activist savior. I'm supposed to just basically wait for other people to do for me, because there is no other solution that I can handle. There's nothing that I can do. I have to wait for others to do for me. Whether it's a politician or whatever, I'm supposed to wait for someone else's direction. So, it's a place where, having the victim mentality renders you in a way powerless. But then you have, I would say, mostly nefarious people who keep you in that place as well, right? They make sure that you don't leave that mentality because they benefit from your weakness.
So a couple of quick thoughts. One of my kind of rants there that folks that know me have probably heard a few times, but basically is that there's, 1,000,001 self-help books out there that have been written. Everyone that I've ever come across, which isn't, an incredible number, but, they're a significant number. They all talk about, sort of personal empowerment, something that Sphinx mentioned earlier. You need to take ownership, whatever your circumstance, however legitimately hard done by you have been. And some people have been incredibly hard done by, and sometimes even generationally. But irrespective of all that, you kind of have to take ownership for what you're going to do next. And if you don't take that ownership, then that kind of weighs you down. This message is kind of, ubiquitous in these things. And in fact, some of the people that preach this victimhood, right? Whether it's in the realm of race, which is kind of probably the most common place where you hear it, but in many different areas, are themselves people who don't actually practice that. They themselves have taken ownership and made something, very successful of their lives by, either they themselves followed this, what's called this success sequence. They had a step up for a variety of reasons, right? At the outset, maybe the two-parent household that gives you a very like high likelihood of success, for example. Just if you have that, right? But then what they preach is something extremely different, and that's it's very difficult to square that, because you're basically, and it makes me the one of the few things that makes me really angry, frankly, is if you teach people that they should be victims, that they should have that they're right to have victim mentality because they've been hard done by, whether it's because of their collective identity or whatever reason, you're kind of ruining their lives in a way, right? For especially if they really believe you, because you're so believable, and that's just terrible in my view.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And that was one of the things that I started noticing a lot, where the people who are preaching certain things don't live that life, would never live that life, especially the people who have all these solutions, or pretend that like their life uh, is much. Actually, I'll just be more direct. Um, I have a big problem when it comes to, if we're staying on the topic of race, I have a big problem with the Black upper class, especially the Black upper class that reside in the media, because they preach weakness. They preach Black weakness, like Black, um, not just Black weakness, but just like being infantile, inferiority, right? They preach all this stuff, and then they pretend that they're one of them. The poor and just fortunate. We're just alike. Um,
Adam, if I can
Meanwhile,
just jump in, when you say
yeah,
inferiority, what do you mean? Because I think the message is kind of that something's been imposed on you, that you're not
yeah,
inherently inferior,
right.
or is that what's being said? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because the way they may not see it this way, but the way they make it sound is that being Black in America means you're inferior. And they're reinforcing that concept, right? Just by existence, we're inferior. And to me, that doesn't make any sense. And I don't think it helps anybody, but they don't actually believe that. They think that by existence, you're not going to be able to succeed. Meanwhile, some of the most successful people, regardless of skin color, in this country. Um, I think about someone like LeBron James, who's probably a billionaire by now, who went on television, or he didn't necessarily go on television, but cameras are there, saying that he doesn't know if one day a cop is going to wake up on one side of the bed and go out and kill a Black person. Meanwhile, LeBron James is escorted by the police on a daily basis into arenas across the country. It's this disconnect that comes from the Black upper class, and they preach all this nonsense. And especially for someone like LeBron James, do you think when he lived in Akron he was worried about cops, or was he worried about crazy people who were in his neighborhood who looked just like him? Who was worried about gangbangers? Was he worried about drive-bys? Was he worried about all this other stuff that was going on? So it's this disconnect, and they preach all this nonsense, and they preach that basically their success is rare, and they just broke through the cracks. But you can't succeed unless the government does more, and unless white people are nicer. And I can't stand it. It's the number one thing that pisses me off. Progressives piss me off just in general, but it's these people. They're the woke white supremacists, and they are white. They basically preach Black inferiority, and they want me to accept it, and I don't. Anybody can jump in.
I was about to say, don't get me started on LeBron James now. Every time I see him, I just get angry. I get angry because, yes, these people, they're like, I don't know, what do you call it? You call it hypocrites, or you call it, what do you call it? Like, you're just contradicting everything that they say. And I always tell, I tell my students all the time, like, just random, like, you guys are not victims. Whatever TikTok is telling you, whatever Twitter is telling you, whatever social media is telling you, it's like, it's just infiltrated all through. Every time you open up your phone, it's like, woe is me, you guys are at the bottom, you'll never make it to the top, it's very rare. Like you said, it's just like, it's only a few of us who can make it, when it's in fact not true. But the only thing that we see is a lot of athletes or entertainers or something that they don't push anything else but that. And those are small windows of opportunity to make those things like sports teams, and 1 in a million of being a famous singer. So that's why it looks like such a small percentage of Black, Hispanic, whatever people succeed, because all we see is entertainment.
One of the things, Adam, that you talk about is that if you're actually living in this country, you've already got a lot of privilege and or at least opportunity, even if it doesn't seem like it in the specific microcosm that you're in.
Yes. I mean, just from a statistical standpoint, we are the 1% of the world. And, granted, we all have a struggle. We all have our own problems. America has American problems. Certain people live in poorer areas. They have their own unique issues. There were moments in my life we were poor. We were homeless. So it's not to take away from that, but the difference is that, me being poor as a kid, in certain countries would mean that I would be poor as an adult, and then my children would be poor, and then their children, right? That's the reality for a lot of places. The opportunities are less. And I think that the opportunity to be self-sufficient is pretty great here. Do we have our problems? Absolutely. Different areas have different problems, and they should be addressed. But in comparison to a lot of other places, even in Western Europe, just how they're structured in many places. I was considering going to Germany, and if I was to leave America and go to Germany, I'd basically be at the bottom, just the way they're structured. And I'm not at the bottom here, not today, and not even years ago when I was considering moving there. And there are multiple reasons why, but it's just something to think conceptually about. How fortunate we actually are, and we should be thankful for the things that we do have, and be less envious about the things that we wish we could have. Because even the successful people that exist in our society, they're, some of them have their own problems. Money doesn't solve everything. And I think most people just want to be content. Most people just want to be able to sustain themselves, save a little money, take a vacation every so often, and take care of the family. So, we can't say that these particular opportunities exist in other places.
So I invited Zulu One to join us on stage. Sphinx, I think, needs to step out. So thanks for joining us. I really appreciate that. And it's great to have your voice here. I look forward to more in the future. Zulu One, you wanted to come up and add your voice to the stage here.
Yeah, thank you everybody for having me. I've been working on trying to figure out this issue for a little while, and I think we have what is the echoes of a pandemic of almost unresolved trauma that is turning into and manifesting itself in different aspects of society. And I think that victimhood or victorhood or the victim perpetrator dynamic, I think it has a lot to do with being entangled in this cycle that perpetuates itself in, the aggressor and the victim, that almost both have their parts in this dynamic. So I've been doing a lot of work with people that have suffered from trauma in the past, and it's almost like this person is stuck, or the people are stuck in these patterns that keep repeating themselves. And once they're able to address the intergenerational trauma in their family, they're able to resolve these issues. And I don't think until we're able to do that en masse, we'll be able to clean up some of the dynamics that are just preventing us from stepping into some really strong momentum as a country. So I think in some many capacities, a lot of the phenomena that we're seeing societally are based on this concept of just intergenerational trauma that hasn't been resolved. You might look at it as racism, the kind of the woke movement, school shootings, the mental health crisis, are all pointing towards this our inability to be able to deal with this at scale.
Well, the one thing I will say is I don't necessarily disagree with what Zulu said, but there are situations, if you think about it, that it's not direct to the person, right? It is manipulation. It is manufacturing of a reason to feel like a victim. So, like, we would say someone is illogical if their grandmother was abused, right? Abused by their spouse, right? And they're a victim of violence. Should the granddaughter feel like a victim because her grandmother was abused? And we would say that's illogical. You're 2 generations separated from that. Her abuse has nothing to do with what your current situation is. You should, it's unfortunate what happened to your grandmother, but you should keep moving forward. But yet, in the terms of race, I'm supposed to, and without, most people don't know their history like that, to even know, because by the way, not every Black person in America comes from a lineage of slavery. You'd be surprised at how many don't. But I'm supposed to look at, let's say, a lineage of slavery and say, because of this that happened however many years ago, and I'm making the assumption that someone in my ancestry line was a slave, I should now carry that offense, that burden, and hold on to it. Or, how is that beneficial to me today? And there are people who I believe are nefarious, who want you to hold on to that as a way of channeling your anger towards people of today who have nothing to do with that unfortunate situation, way down the line into your ancestry. So I do think that there are nefarious people, and regardless if it's Black or anything else, I think there are nefarious people who try to use your identity to gain some sort of leverage, to gain an emotional leverage, to get you to do what they want you to do, to buy their products, to buy their book, to see their movie, to attend their seminars. The list goes on, to vote for their candidate. And I think one of the realizations before I wrote my book was seeing how prevalent it was, especially in politics. The usage of identity politics has become virtuous, to use identity in every which way, and no one even cares that it's manipulative. No one even cares that they're weaponizing people's identity to get a vote. And I have a problem with that. I have a problem with it if you use it for Black people, women, any identity, I think there's something wrong with that. We should be voting for candidates who have good ideas, who have the best interests of the American public, and not people who are specifically trying to cater to one demographic or at one moment and period of time because it seems politically expedient to do so. Because oftentimes when they do that anyways, they really don't give a shit about that demographic anyways. And they're just using it as a way to signal, to virtue signal. So I won't rant anymore, but someone can jump in.
Just one quick comment, and just something, and Zuluan, I'll get you to respond, and then Miss Nova has her hand up. But one thing that strikes me here, so I spent some time living on a First Nations reserve. I think in the U.S. you probably call it an Indian reservation. That's the Canadian term, American Indian. And one of the things I discovered was something like what you, or I learned about, which I hadn't been aware of, was this kind of concept of a cycle of cross-generational abuse, where what will happen is, basically someone themselves is abused, and then they try to kind of push that abuse on to the next generation in some measure of horns, and it's kind of it can be very hard to break that cycle. And I'm saying that just from kind of actually watching it happen, even with people who, of course, really wouldn't want to be doing such things, but the weight of the past is actually something can be something that's very significant, that's very hard to break out of. Anyway, that's my comment in Zuluan, and then we'll get Miss Nova to speak.
Yeah, and that's thank you, Jen. That's a very good point, and that's the point that I'm getting to at the end of the day, is that I'm very interested in the victim perpetrator dynamic because of that absolution of responsibility to the collective identity, right? It's like, if you absolve your individual responsibility to the larger collective, you can justify righteous acts of atrocities against a perceived perpetrator, and that could potentially lead to genocide, right? And it's like, and how us as people give a population the tools to be able to address that unresolved trauma, so we don't fall into this identitarianism, because identitarianism at the end of the day is a collective victimization in some capacity. It said, I am my identity rather than who I am as an individual. Therefore, I absolve my responsibility to the larger ideology, which that larger ideology can commit any number of atrocities in the name of whatever kind of esoteric goals that it has. And so that's the root of my curiosity, comes from what leads to that phenomenon of absolution. And the thought that I have, and John, what you were saying, is that intergenerational trauma creates that cycle where we can perpetuate those atrocities, right? It would get us to the place where we can be entangled with a previous generation of trauma. So you see this in Nazi Germany was a prime example of this.
So I'll just jump in. I'm talking. This is actually what I was looking at, is like within family. So it's like at the individual level. Like there's someone in the family, or multiple people that abuse, right? And then the next generation that is abused then sort of perpetrates that on the following generation, and it takes incredible will and therapy in many cases, and just sort of support, right, from others to break that cycle in many cases. That's and for people that haven't seen it or experienced it, that might seem bizarre, but I can assure you it's a very real thing. And of course at a population scale, that's I don't know if that's the same phenomenon, but of course what you're talking about makes sense, because in this group identity, people have indeed committed all sorts of atrocities without, in a sense, almost realizing that what they're doing is an atrocity.
So I'm very involved with a type of methodology of systemic work called family constellation therapy. And in this work, it's literally that phenomenon. The phenomenon is that you inherit unresolved trauma from previous generations through, they don't necessarily know where this phenomenon comes from. Some people think it's epigenetics, or that, we inherit trauma through our DNA, or that DNA has some type of memory. But if you take that same concept and create and blow it out to scale, you can see how systems of people can have a collective memory inside of it, and that collective memory can have trauma inside of it. And so the more people that you're able to get to align and heal that intergenerational trauma, the tide of the society can change towards a more aligned, beneficial growth, positive pattern rather than a destructive one.
Fascinating. I'd love to know more later. Let's stay in touch. And Miss Nova.
Thank you for having me, Adam. You're one of my heroes. Absolutely love your work. Zulu, one of the things that I think you spoke to that I was going to talk about is the microbial DNA study. And so when they talked about how generational trauma happens, they did it in an experiment, and I'm sure you know about this, some others may not, but they did an experiment with mice. And they gave mice orchids, and a set of mice they shocked with orchids, and then another set they didn't. And then those mice then had children, and then later on, the mice that were shocked, their offspring actually were afraid of the orchids. And they realized that there was some, that microbial DNA issue that came along with that, and that it lasted through 1 to 2 generations. With that being found, though, we should be way far away separated from that kind of trauma, even though you could look at maybe going through Jim Crow era or whatever. The other thing is critical theory, which eventually turned into critical race theory that brought some of this other stuff in that we're dealing with now, going into school systems and things like that. Now, I'm a lifelong conservative. I'm almost 50 years old. My first vote was for Ross Perot. So I definitely am on the right side of things. And I think what we have is a generation right now of manufactured trauma, and then we also have generations that are suffering from PTSD from living in war zones. And so it's going to literally take almost a separation and a reorganization and to get the breakthrough in our Black and brown neighborhoods to realize that you literally can claim those things. You can claim a good path for you. You can find a spouse. Grew up with a single mother, and I'm married with a child. So those things are possible, and it doesn't have to be the fringe. You can love your Blackness. You can love your community. You can love your people and be conservative, because if we were to be honest to God, truthful, we are truly a conservative community within the Black and brown community. The other thing, though, is we have an entire media built around celebrating victimhood within the Black community. Adam, you just touched on it. These Black commentators, all they speak about is what danger we're in. But let me just tell you, as a Black woman, and I've been to 15 Trump rallies. I'm involved in Brexit. I stood on the White House lawn and listened to President Trump speak. Believe me, I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. But at a Trump rally was the safest place. Me, of one of 10 Black people in a field of 50,000 people. I'm more safe there than I am walking down a black neighborhood. And that's because of what the media perpetuates to our communities, what our parents, that little tiny genome of what goes on in the home, where black women have this belief that they don't need someone because why do they need them? They're abusive, or they just don't come around. And that continual stereotype. So the belief that the government is supposed to help me when it's the very government that they are voting in that keeps them oppressed. That's all I got to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Well, there are a great many things that you said there, which I think we could jump off on. I don't know, Jaleesa, do you want to jump in, or Zulu One? You're very welcome to jump in. You don't have to kind of wait for me.
Well, I agree with what Miss Nova said about like people. I do not understand how people can protest a government while simultaneously supporting them at the same time with like believing everything they say and saying, well, these people are going to do right and they're going to make our community better and all of this stuff. But at the same time, there's a lot of like injustice and, you know, they don't treat us right. And like she said, like the message that's being pushed is, you know, you don't need a man and you don't need this and you don't need that. But like, I don't see that in any other community, like at all. And in the masses, like that message being preached like that. And also to piggyback off what she said, I also went to a Trump rally here because I was very curious. And there were just nothing but like really nice people. No one was screaming, no one was yelling, you know, what I see online all the time from the other side. And I don't see how, you know, I mean, I've seen some people and on the, you know, more conservative side being, you know, radical, but for the most part, I felt very safe. And I don't know why the media, I do know why, but why the media paints the other side to be just like the worst, when in reality, I think it's the better side to be on at this point in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, I think the media has shown itself to be extremely biased, at least like the major news outlets. They are left-wing biased. So it is it is part of their job to smear the other side, smear anybody who's on the other side. And since Trump came into office, the level of dehumanization has increased exponentially. It's something that I wrote about today for the New York Post, talking about how we are politically dehumanizing the opposition too much. I'm not trying to play like who does it more. I have my opinions, but it's not good on either side. It's not good. And I wanted to use the passing of Diamond from Diamond and Silk to talk about this because, you know, I saw a lot of people who didn't even wait an hour after finding out that she had passed away to gloat, to smear her, to do things that we would never do for anybody else because we wouldn't want it done to someone that we care about, right? There are people that I don't agree with, but if they passed away, I wouldn't be on Twitter gloating about it and laughing about it because I wouldn't want it done to someone that I care about. And so, the idea of just saying rest in peace and just moving on, or even just not saying anything. I think in the age of social media, we forgot how to not say anything. You don't have to proclaim anything publicly every single time something happens in the world. And if you can't say something nice, then don't say it. Especially when someone passes away. If you can't not dehumanize someone in a moment where Diamond has relatives. Her sister Silk is grieving. There are people that cared about her. And, you go out there amongst plenty of people to use this as an opportunity to get a political jab in. So I think the level of dehumanization that exists in our society is far too high. And this isn't necessarily a shot at the left or anything like that. I've seen it sometimes on the right, and I don't like it. You can just disagree with people, but when someone dies, that's it. Like, there's no coming back from that. So I think at the minimum, you can give someone a little bit of time to, maybe even get buried before you smear their existence. There used to be that level of decorum, and I think it's melting away, especially since 2016, when someone in particular started running for office. But that's just my opinion.
I think we've also got Mimi and Ty Williams up, and I think Ty, you wanted to jump in and say something. Oh, he just jumped out. He's requesting now. Ms. Nova, do you want to jump in quickly?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add to that. I think you're exactly right. But here's the thing. I've been on the right side of my whole life, and I've never been so vilified. I've never been called outside of my name. I've never been treated so poorly literally my humanity, being called a coon and an Uncle Tom and all of these horrible things for the way that I vote. And I think for those of us on the right, we're just kind of like, hey, look, this is America. You can believe whatever you want to believe, and you can vote the way that's right for you. But my humanity was stripped away, and I watched not just mine, but many, many others. When I marched in D.C. on Black Lives Plaza, I had people coming of white and black trying to jump me because I had a Blexit shirt on saying "Back the Blue." So yeah, I can't co-sign with that type of mentality. And what happened with Diamond today was atrocious. Of how many people, black and brown people, who came out and literally dogged her out. It was horrible.
Ty, you want to jump in? My comment is just before you jump in, I'll just say there's something about social media that kind of, and I suppose anonymity. There's this whole pylon mentality on one side, right? And then when there's anonymity, it kind of unleashes the worst in people. So there's this really, really dark side that I think we've been able to see through this response to Diamond's passing. Anyway, Ty, why don't you just jump in?
Yeah, I think one of your the speakers kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it comes down to the commercialization of victimhood and the commercialization of Black fears, right? So there was a time in the country where Black people were, enslaved, then endured, a century of Jim Crow slaveryism. So that is there, and no one here should be doubting that that's real and that happened. But what's happening like now, right? Like post, 2000, post, Bush. It's more so about how do we get the Black people to stay in line, right? How do we get Black people to continue to vote democratically at 90 to 93% margins? And if you think about that, you think about how would you do that? That's really difficult to do because people are, very fickle. People like to, imagine, voting for one issue or another issue. But you do that by making the other side perpetually a boogeyman, perpetually uneven. You can't even. It's not even. You can't even think to vote for that side because that you're voting that side. You're betraying your race. You are you're now you're stepping out. You're basically a pariah. You know what I mean? It's literally, and it's cultural to be a Democrat, Black Democrat, right? So if you so that's why I don't really think there's going to be a large sway in the Republican vote toward the Black vote more towards conservative anytime soon. It's now cultural, right? So if you think about what it takes to get someone to vote for something, you think about it at a scale of 1 to 100, and 50 is that mark that you need to get them to click you this person. If you start off with culturally that you're supposed to be voting this direction, so you're at 45, right? You're at 45. It's more than likely you're going to get the vast majority. And then when you have a commercialization of Black victimhood, right? So you are constantly under threat. The richest Black man basketball player in America comes out and says he's worried about the cops killing him or something. You know what I'm saying? Oprah Winfrey, multiple billionaires, multiple times over, she's telling you that the white people are out to get you. It hits people. It gets them. It's understandable. Most people don't think about politics every day. So when you hear their celebrity telling them, "Hey, look, man, Black people got it rough out here. They always got us. Then hey, look, point to this thing in history. It's just the same thing today. You know what I mean? You'll never. It's really simple to get over that 50% threshold, right? You start off at 45, and then everything else is just really cake. So, I think it just comes down to the commercialization of the victimhood, and hopefully one day we'll it'll maybe get to like 20%. If you get to the Black vote splitting 80-20%, that'll be something. That'll be So that's just my thoughts, and interested to hear what people have to react to that.
The first thing and Ty, I agree with everything you said. Actually, the most poignant thing that you said is that it's cultural. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And that's a great way of putting it. It's, it's beyond, well, do you like the policies? Everybody else is allowed that. Those concessions of, well, I like this politician, well, I don't like these policies. It is a cultural aspect. And if you move away from it, you're a traitor all of a sudden. So, but the one thing I was thinking about was when Stacey Abrams was running for the second time, just recently for governor of Georgia. I want to say like polling came out and she had a decrease in Black male vote. And I remember article after article came out saying, basically blaming Black men and asking what is going on with Black men, what's wrong with them? And you would have thought like she got like 60% of the Black male vote or something like that. It literally just went down to like 88%. Like it was like a marginal decrease, and it was just hilarious because to me it was such a panic because in a way it was like ownership. And I really do believe that people believe that there is a level of ownership when it comes to the Black demographic vote for the Democrat Party. It's not about helping us. It's not about benefiting us. It's about doing what you're expected. It's about ownership. And no matter how little you're given, it's better than the Republicans, right? Because they're a bunch of racists. Right, so they always hang that it's a low hanging fruit of a narrative that the Republicans are worse. I know people who think the Democrats are full of crap and they don't do anything and blah blah blah, and they can go on and on about the Democrats, but then they're like, but I can't vote Republican, and that's a cultural aspect. They can't vote Republican not because necessarily these Republicans, because it's going against the culture. And nobody wants to do that.
I would just say one thing. I think it even goes deeper than that. I think in a dating, if you come out and say you're a Black conservative, you're a pariah. I mean, that's it. You just because you want lower taxes and a strong military, you're unacceptable. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to look deeper than that. It's just you're a Republican. You know what I mean? I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm DeSantis all the way. But I you voting to someone doesn't define you. You know what I mean? The voting, voting left or right shouldn't be a breaker, but it is now. It really is. I'm a law student, and it is. And it's sad, but it's also the same. I'm not dating someone who's telling me they've got they and them pronouns. So I guess it's I guess it goes both ways. But I think on the Republican side, for the Republican black side, it's not even getting into the policy, right? Like you said, like, oh yeah, you want low taxes, I'm not interested in you. No, it's more, oh, you're representing with this brand, and in my mind, I've been told that this brand represents someone who's a racist, who hates themselves or something like that, and that's it. So yeah.
Well, and I am a person who thinks about politics every single day. And the Democrats are the demographics that are leaving the Democratic plantation really is Latinos and Black men. There's a huge portion of Black male Republicans or even conservatives per se, libertarians even, that are leaving. Really, kind of their stronghold right now is Black women, unfortunately, and that's the group that I've worked with for 20 years.
I want to get Mimi to jump in. You wanted to come up as speaker, and you've been quiet over here. Do you want to speak?
Yes. Hi, Jan and Adam. By the way, I want to say I thank you so much. I recently started following you. I think you're wonderful. And I'll keep it short and sweet. I've worked for 12 years in the elder care industry. Previously, I worked in private pay, assisted living placement, and now I work with Medicaid low-income families. And so I've worked with a lot of families. I've had the pleasure of helping a civil rights leader who marched with Martin Luther King Jr. I worked with a sweet lady who lived in Tuskegee whose husband was a professor. And I posted on the notes a book that a gentleman here in Indiana wrote, and he has an amazing story. And I just want to say that in talks of generations and victimhood and all these things that we're talking about, that I just wish that we could celebrate these individuals and their stories and their strengths, and just speaking with them and learning who they are. I've had moments where I've just cried and thanked them for speaking with me. I think that a lot of the older generation has a lot of wise survival stories and just stories of their strength that I really think that I wish that the young people could learn from. And I don't know how we can share that with them so that they can learn from it. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
This is something that's, I don't know how this is, there's this line that you've heard. I think, Rogan kind of repeats it. And it's, what is it? Tough times breed weak men breed difficult times breed strong men create good times, or something like this, right? And we're kind of at this time where, and there, of course, there's all sorts of suffering in society, but there isn't this kind of, we haven't experienced a world war. We've been involved in all sorts of wars, but they're kind of far away from most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
There isn't this sort of realization. This is one of the things that Adam was talking about in our interview in here, that we have it really good, actually, relative to how things could be, or how they have been even here not too long ago. And this is where, but this, kind of teaching of victim mentality creates this sort of perception that things are, the worst, and people can get away with saying things like this. This is the worst society. It's the root of all the problems of the world, and so on and so forth. And you just don't have that perspective, and it's the elders very often. And part of this is there's this kind of disrespect for elders, and even the elders themselves don't have a sense of how profoundly important their stories and messages are to the young people. So there's this kind of bizarre disconnect. One of the things we talked about in this interview, and I've just had another interview today where we talked a lot about this, is how, when you live in a family unit, it's the nuclear family that sort of creates a high probability of success, relatively irrespective of your socioeconomic background, race, anything. It kind of transcends all that. It's kind of incredible, right? And you have groups and people, most famously BLM recently, that are sort of committed to breaking that structure. It's just the most bizarre thing. But I would suspect that we have a lot fewer examples of this now. Is that these, the sort of multi-generational family structure likewise creates strength. And I don't know, maybe the studies have been done on this. I haven't thought about it until this time, but I would love to know that, and I would expect that, because that wisdom that gets passed down is incredibly valuable, and because you don't have to learn everything in the school of hard knocks, so to speak.
Adam, may I add to that, please? I'm working now in a program that is Medicaid funded, and I speak to a lot of families. I'm speaking to families in, Gary, Indiana, Indianapolis, and other areas that are low income, and they're taking care of their parents now. They're taking care of their grandparents now. I'm speaking with young people, and I'm greeted with a lot of kindness and warmth, and most of the time these are wonderful people who are committed to taking care of their families. And then sometimes we're speaking with people that are just interested in getting the money. But I do see that in the committed families that there's definitely a big difference in their appreciation that they have for their elders. So you can see it. And we were talking about cultural differences. There's definitely cultural differences. I think it's more economic based now than by race, but you can just see the kindness. If you just take a moment to see, you can see that there is hope. I feel it when I speak to people. There's always going to be a bad penny, but, I do see that the ones that are taking care of their grandparents, they're spending time to talk to them, and it gives me hope in the future. I just hope to see more of it.
Folks, I just wanted to say I think we're gonna need to finish the space in about 16 minutes from now, at the top of the hour. One of the things, Adam, that you actually started is a kind of an independent, I don't know, is it a publishing house already? I don't know. And I think that's quite amazing. You're actually starting to bring on some very, very interesting voices, in my view. So I thought, before we finish up, that you have a chance to talk about that a little bit, about Wrong Speak.
Sure. It's developing into a publishing house. Yes. We just signed our first author outside of myself. And we just completed that Friday. So now we're in the process of having it edited and going through the book publishing process and seeing how we can do. The goal is to support people who are lesser known, first-time authors, but people who are good writers and have an interesting story. and see if we can turn something from it. You know, I'm an IT guy by trade. I didn't have a public profile, and here I am today. So I believe that, you know, if I can do it, other people can do it as well. And I'm trying to do everything I can to support other people, give them strategy and connect them with individuals, and you know, show them support.
I'm kind of curious, Zulu One, do you actually work professionally in this field of trying to address multi-generational trauma?
So I would say yes to both of those things. I am an IT guy by trade, like Adam, but I also have been involved with this work for about 14 years, consulting on systemic intergenerational trauma in family systems and also in communities and businesses. And I host a podcast, that's the Zulu One podcast, on this subject specifically. And I have a Substack that I write about intergenerational trauma and how it affects family systems.
So one thing I wanted to mention, you know, we have another 14 minutes here. If you're a speaker, you can actually add tweets to the space. And the way you do that is you basically, as if you were to kind of, I guess it's the share button or whatever, you share, and then there's an option there when you pick your tweet and you're in a space to actually share it to the space, and you can add your info up there if you're a speaker. So I mean, Adam, you're obviously most welcome to do that. So one, I'll try to do it in a moment when I'm just listening. Now, Miss Nova, what an amazing story that you say you've been conservative from day one, and I don't know, it's been wonderful having you on stage and offering your thoughts.
I popped into this room by accident. I was looking around and saw this room and thought that there would be some beneficial conversation and maybe something that I could add to it. Yeah, I'm not an IT background person. I actually spent 20 years as a police dispatcher. And then I got involved in, my husband, family, and I relocated to Arizona. And then I got involved in Blexit here in Arizona and helped to build the first chapter of that here. And that's how I ended up in DC to march with Back the Blue, because obviously police dispatcher. And I'm one of those that have to go underneath this moniker, the Mrs. Nova moniker, just because in my earlier life of being involved in Black women's empowerment, I got horribly doxxed, and it really messed with my career. And so I don't want it to mess with my second career. So I'm one of the ones that I kind of have to stay in the background. But it has been wonderful sharing space with you guys and for letting me add something to the conversation, especially with Adam and Zulu One.
Random question, but have we met? Because I did an event for Blexit, Arizona. Was it last year? No, I'm sorry, 2021. It was in, I keep forgetting the name of those towns. It was like show something.
Sholo?
Area. Sholo, thank you.
Yeah, no, actually, that was one of the few ones that I didn't make it to. It was the roundup that was going on up there. And that was one of the few that I did not make it to, unfortunately. But yeah, it was an amazing organization, and I still help out in the background, but not as much as I used to.
I gotcha. Okay. I was just like, hey, wait a minute. Okay.
So I put up a link to the American Thought Leaders interview. So I actually host a show called American Thought Leaders on Epoch TV. It's also on television, on the NTD network, which goes to about 30 million households. It's sort of a truncated version of the interview that fits into a half-hour slot. There's all sorts of stuff in there in the realm of what we talked about today, health freedom, just basically all sorts of rational discussion about important issues that there's dominant false narratives about. It's kind of what we specialize in here. I also put up, Mimi wanted to share something with you, Adam, I noticed, and I put that up there too in the tweets, and maybe we can put up a few other things. But Mimi, did you want to say something before we finish up?
Not really, but thank you for posting that. Mr. Womack was an amazing gentleman. He's retired military. He grew up in Alabama in the Jim Crow era, and his very shocking and interesting life. And he's the one that told me about his own book, and I was thankful that I read it. My English teacher also wrote a book, but I cannot find it on Amazon. But if I can find it, I'll come back and I'll post it to this space. Her name was Margaret Mack, and she was the first Black teacher in my hometown in an all-white school, and she also wrote a book as well before she passed, and it was, I never knew my own name, but I just can't find it. I've always wanted to read her book because she was an amazing teacher as well. Again, I just think that we should celebrate our elders and anything we can glean and learn from them. And if you have a grandparent, encourage them to write their stories down before they pass, because, it's important. Thanks.
One of the things that I kind of astounded by, I'm going to comment on this because I visited the Bronx today. There's a district, there's many districts that are really in rough shape up in the Bronx. And this particular district had it's only 7% of students that finish high school, whether or not they actually get into college. And some of these people in this statistic are actually people who have in theory gotten into college, but they're unable to do basic reading and writing. So it's only 7% of people are actually able to be to basically be successful in college from this area. And there's I've learned that there's actually districts. This is District 12. There's other districts which are like that number is 2%. And it reflects such a profound failure of our society that this is a thing, because there's no, it's not. There's also, of course, this question: does everybody absolutely need to be going to college? Is that what makes sense for most people? I think that's that. I don't know how we got into thinking that way, but aside from that, most people should be able to have the basic skills to be able to go to college. And there's nothing aside from societal barriers, frankly, that would prevent that. So this is a societal failure for us. I was at a school that is it's called Vertex Academies. It's sort of the first of a network that this gentleman named Ian Rowe, very, very successful educator, has basically started. It's been more in this charter school system. It's much more common to have grade schools and middle schools, but high schools are kind of the rarer thing, and this is kind of what he's branched into now. And it's sort of this, the whole concept of the educational structure is to basically explain to people that they have agency and that whatever their reality is, that they can have the tools to basically be successful. And I joined a class kind of as a not exactly as a student, of course, but it's called the class is called Pathways to Power. They used the textbook is something like 7 effective habits or 7 habits of effective teens. There's something effective people, but this is sort of a version is focusing on teens, and they, and these kids, I was kind of expecting when I was that age, I would have treated a subject like this, I think, very cynically. These kids were very serious about it, kind of across the board, and thoughtful, and and you could see that they're benefiting massively from it. I was thinking to myself, even I had a very, very, in a lot of ways, I didn't realize how privileged my upbringing was, even as my parents were, kind of arrived from Poland with 2 suitcases as immigrants. But I could have used this class. I was thinking to myself, because it's amazing when you have that opportunity to reflect on how much your own perspective of yourself affects your ability to basically be successful, irrespective of the reality that you're coming from. So the reason I'm talking about this is that there's some amazing work being done in some very, very challenged communities, that is sort of attempting to turn the tide on this. And it's it's kind of a drop in a vast ocean, but in the end, it's the only way to actually shift things is to kind of pick something that you think you can do. What we do at Epoch is we try to tell true stories as best we can, and unfortunately, so many of these big media make it a rare place to come, right? Because there's so many of these so-called media are following narratives instead of just trying to understand what's happening in the world and explain, and share that as best they can. I think that's what journalism is supposed to do, right? To actually speak truth to power in this way. But every one of these, these conversations for me, it's a drop in the ocean, but I think it makes a difference. And someone actually I saw someone sent me a direct message about this moments ago, so thank you for that. I think it was Christine here in the audience. Any final thoughts as we finish?
I just wanted to share that I've been a long-time subscriber of the Epoch Times. I think what you do there, your work there, is amazing. And it is true journalism, which is something we just simply don't have. And I would ask that everybody support them by actually buying a subscription. Even the live stuff that you put out is amazing. Adam, you have no idea of the impact that you have on a lot of us conservatives to just kind of find our way in this space. Zulu, I can't wait to find you and to follow you. And I hope that this night added some value to the conversations that you guys are having on a regular basis.
Most definitely. And thank you for the kind words. I guess my final thought is just that I believe in autonomy over your thoughts. And I want us to be less in a box. It's not just black box or black conservative box or any box. Start thinking for yourselves. Don't get married to politicians. Don't think that they always say the next election is the election that will either save America or destroy it. They say that every year or every 4 years. So just remember, you have plenty that you can control, and they usually start within your home. So as long as you take care of your kids, or if you don't have children, make sure you family plan properly. That is how you increase the likeliness of success in your life and in your loved one's life. So, yeah, cherish your relationships. That's what I'll leave it as.
That's wonderful. And Adam, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the interview. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for joining the space. And Miss Nova, thank you for being a subscriber. You guys are our lifeblood. We need every one of you. This is how we keep the lights on and keep putting out good journalism. So thanks again, everybody. And until our next space.